This towering behemoth of a computer is a Dell Dimension XPS Gen 4, and it's the most quintessential example of early 2000s Dell gaming PC I've ever seen. Dell didn't acquire Alienware until a year after this came out, so this plastic pile of peeling Pentium stickers, pretty lights, perplexing parts, and positively plethoric application of XPS branding was Dell's Halo computer in early 2005. The XPS line was sold as a higher cost, higher performance trim level of Dell's consumer-facing Dimension line until 2006, and was marketed towards gamers, creators, and PC enthusiasts. In today's video, we'll take a tour of the PC inside and out, play some classic games of the era on it, and comment on some of the benefits and drawbacks of not only the physical computer, but the Windows XP operating system I'm excited to revisit. Let's get started. It's amazing how Dell managed to create one of the most good-looking and bad-looking computers at the same time here. Because of the use of pretty cheap plastic and a sort of rough textured finish, these computers are highly susceptible to scratches and cracks, especially as they age. I've also somehow managed to discolor some of the plastic using supposedly harmless cleaners. It shows its age in both design language and resistance to wear. This Gen 4 XPS shares its chassis with a couple other Dell computers like the Precision 670 workstation, featuring a surprisingly fragile front door that is rare to find not missing. Another covers the front I/O. The power button is top right, and below, these doors hide 3 5¼ bays and a floppy drive, as well as 2 USB 2.0 ports, audio in and out, and FireWire 400. Below that mess of plastic is a large aluminum panel sporting the Dell logo in the center and surrounded by air intake venting. On the sides, we see more plastic cladding, a fake aluminum Dell logo in the center, with more XPS branding near the front. I have to admit, I'm a sucker for the black and silver contrast, but the materials choice definitely didn't age as well. Despite XPS models in the next few years vastly improving in build quality, see my previous review of the Dell XPS 420 that came out a year later, Gamers Nexus has demonstrated that Dell is reverting back to this questionable design language. There's not much on top, save for these vents in the plastic, more on that top vent later. However, many sins are almost instantly forgotten as soon as the system comes to life. Yes, in 2005, Dell had prominent RGB lighting on the front. It shines around that aluminum plate from a clear plastic diffuser hidden in the intake, even lights up the Dell logo. There were several colors to choose from, but sadly it was not software addressable, requiring you to boot back into BIOS to select one of the few pre-baked options. Shoot, I don't care though, just having this on here is awesome as heck, and I'm sure would have made you the instant cool kid. Moving around back, we notice the motherboard I/O is missing some important things. We have serial and parallel ports, mini DIN ports, USB and Ethernet, but the only graphics outputs came off your graphics card, and the only sound output was from whatever sound card you had installed, so those two had to be dedicated options. Lastly, there's a tuner card, some plastic venting, the power supply in the bottom, and 2 different types of locks for the chassis. On to the next party trick, getting inside this beast. This handy handle unlatches the chassis to allow it to split open, exposing the interior exceptionally well. No side panel to remove here. Cooling is handled by 3 80mm fans, 2 in the rear under this XPS branded green plastic air guide, and 1 at the bottom front for the expansion cards. Everything is toolless, and you can see how the large tri-heat pipe heatsink can be removed to expose the CPU without turning a single screw. This Pentium 4 570J ran at the blistering speed of 3.8 GHz on its single hyper-threaded core. It's a 90nm Prescott chip with only 32-bit support, has 1 MB of level 2 cache, and I've upgraded the 1 GB of RAM to 4 GB of PC2 4200 DDR2, which would have been eye-wateringly expensive in 2005. The original Radeon X850 XT Platinum Edition had long since burned out, and I replaced it with this Dell OEM error-correct GeForce 7800 GTX. What a cool looking card. Can you believe it only has 256 megs of VRAM? Below that, I've also replaced the missing original Sound Blaster Auto G2 ZS with this Sound Blaster X-Fi Titanium sound card, but the original tuner capture card is still here. Storage was originally a 250GB Maxter hard drive, but in keeping with the Best of 05 theme, I installed in its place a 150GB Western Digital Velociraptor, which has this brilliant window looking into those 10,000 RPM platters. I was lucky to find this 2004 drive with less than 200 hours on it in absolutely perfect shape. The rest of the system is consistent with Dells of this era. Some nice basic cable management leads to a large quantity of internal drive bays, which can be populated using these handy rails to mount with. In the basement, a thin proprietary 460-watt power supply spans the bottom. All in all, this is a unique and effective way of containing the parts and easily accessing them, if more than a tad on the over-engineered side. Of course, we have to run Windows XP on here. Let's have an error-correct experience. Ditch my usual Logitech peripherals for this always guaranteed to work mini-den set that happens to be from HP. Fire up time. Our classic Dell splash screen is followed by a wave of pure, unadulterated nostalgia. That Bliss wallpaper, the green start button, I can't help myself. Time to dig into some classic games. As I mentioned in the XPS 420 review, if you're going to play older games, an older computer can be a real treat to do that on. No need to apply compatibility fixes to make them run on newer computers. Sims 2 feels just as good as it did back in the day when my sister got it as a gift and I would play it from time to time. I didn't understand much of the gameplay back then, but now that I do, it's super fun to hop into this pixelated, low-res universe again and mess around. Of course, you know I love my racing games, and 2004's Need for Speed Underground 2 runs smooth as a baby's bottom on this hardware. Gosh, this game was always one of my favorites. Despite having to drive from race to race, which could suck up a lot of time, I would definitely say I prefer this game to Need for Speed Carbon, its spiritual successor. On to Microsoft Flight Simulator 2004, and here's another example of a game that has no limits on this hardware. My dad got us a copy of this game back then to replace his copy of Pro Pilot 99. I credit him with my love for planes and flight sims, and FS 2004 was very much a large part of my computer time back then. Flying around in a Wright Flyer, an old DC-3, a Ford Tri-Motor, all the way up to 737s and 747s is such a thrill. And though it pales in comparison to the 2020 Microsoft Flight Sim, it's not bad looking either. But not everything is hunky-dory here. Need for Speed Most Wanted fails to launch due to some missing DirectX components. Need for Speed Porsche Unleashed seems to load, but then fails before the profile select screen. And Halo 2 even has its own bugs that prevent it from playing. Tinkering is definitely a necessary step of holding an old PC with an old, out-of-support operating system. Speaking of which, look how it even handles simple web browsing. Don't use Windows XP to go online, it's not safe. I'm demonstrating this using Opera 36, and as you can see, even the YouTube homepage easily overwhelms the poor Pentium 4 here. That's not even including the certificate errors on every website you visit. But hey, you don't need the internet to have fun on Windows XP. I'm swimming in a sea of memories as I play around with changing settings and personalizing all the different appearances and sound options. The aquarium screensaver was always my favorite, and I love seeing it grace my screen again. Overall though, using it doesn't feel like a chore. It's a fairly light operating system on pretty fast hardware for the day, so it's almost indistinguishable from a new computer when testing responsiveness and snappiness. But the sound of the computer? Well, listen for yourself. That Pentium 4 runs hot, and with the restricted front airflow and tiny fans, anything you do on this system is going to result in a loud experience. It's not quite rack server level, but it's no joke. Jumping back into NFS Underground 2 and fasten your seatbelts because this jet is spinning up for takeoff. Even just starting it up elicits a warning shot across the bow. The cooling system on this computer is hampered by small fans and lack of airflow, relying on brute force to cool the parts. They could have done better too. Remember that vent on the top? It's fake! It doesn't do anything. I'll bet a 120mm fan in that space would definitely have helped. And why are both fans not cooling the CPU? One is blocked off inside the air guide. How much quieter would it be if the CPU had double the airflow to work with? And it's the same story everywhere. Dell, why is this whole getup the cheapest plastic? The whole thing creaks and moans when you move it, these doors are flimsy and fragile and break off all the time, and despite the system weighing 42 pounds, there is nowhere convenient to lift up and move it around. Also, when you close that neat party trick of a clamshell case, it has to be squeezed shut and never really feels securely locked in place. But, all that being said, I like this system. I like it a lot. I like that mine still has its drive door. I like the way that it opens up. I like how toolless everything is because it's so inviting to tinkerers like me. I like the lights. I like the gaudy badging and silver and black color scheme. I like that it's old enough to have full support for the old games I love and grew up on. and I even like that I have to mess around with it to get things working sometimes. I like using it, and I get excited every time I turn it on. This is not the finest example of what Dell's capable of, but it's still a great system, and the more I play around with it, the more I feel transported to a time when it didn't matter to me that my computer was loud and noisy. It didn't matter that it was a heap of plastic. All that mattered was that when I hit that power button, I was about to enter a realm of escape, and that this machine was able to handle whatever realm that was. It stood the test of time. It might be flawed, sure, but it's charming at the same time. And if for nothing else than seeing that bee's knees LED lighting on the front and the screensaver turning my desk into a virtual aquarium I could stare at for hours, I love that this PC has its place in my collection of misfit computers. Until next time, you lovely old plastic weirdo. Well, that's gonna about wrap up this video. Thanks very much for watching. I hope this was as interesting to you as it was to me. This plastic blast from the past is definitely fun and has its own quirks, but I am very, very much looking forward to playing around with it and trying to fix some of the issues that are preventing some of these older games that I love to play from launching, like Need for Speed Porsche Unleashed. So if you have any comments or ideas about how to get some of these older issues that I'm running into that are most certainly to do with just getting Windows XP set up to just run everything, not having Windows Update really stinks, leave those comments down below along with suggestions for future videos, anything that you would like to see explored deeper in this video in the future. And again, yeah, thanks very much for watching. If you liked it, hit like. If you liked it enough, hit subscribe, and you'll be notified when I post videos in the future. Have a great day.